getting ready to go into the promise that God has for them. And God told Joshua to give them the instructions that they need to get there. And Israel's fearless leader, Moses, had almost made it in, had almost got to what God was taking him and the children of Israel. And Moses allowed his anger to keep him from walking into the promise that God had his name on, as well as the children of Israel. God had told Moses, he said, bring the people and bring them before this rock. And I want you to speak to the rock. And when you speak to the rock, water will come forth out of this rock. But Moses got angry. And the Bible said that Moses, instead of speaking to the rock, Moses hit the rock. And God didn't tell Moses to hit the rock. And God said, Moses, speak to the rock, that my name and that I may get the glory. And what I'm saying tonight is we got to understand that the devil's always fighting against us. He's always trying to get in the way of what God has for us. And he will find ways to do it if we're not careful. When I was looking at that, come with me to chapter 20 real quick, if you will, just for review, chapter 20. And Moses had the people out there, chapter 20 and verse 7, and the Lord spoke unto Moses, saying, take the rod and gather thou the assembly together, thou and Aaron, thou brother, and speak ye unto the rod before their eyes, and it shall bring forth water, and thou shalt bring forth to them water out of the rock, that thou shalt give the congregation and their beasts to drink. And look what Moses does in verse 9. And Moses took the rod from before the Lord, as he had commanded. And Moses and Aaron gathered the congregation together before the rock. And he said unto them, hear ye me, ye rebels. Hear now, ye rebels. Must we fetch water out of this rock? And instead of Moses speaking to the rock, like God told him to do, Moses let anger get in the way of him completing what God had called him to do. And we have to be careful that when we try to do a job for God, there's going to be some adversaries always standing in the way. There's going to be some things that's going to come up that's going to try to keep us from truly, totally following what God has given us to do. And Moses, as strong as Moses was, Moses had got tired of the people. And he had got angry with them because every time he would tell them what thus said the Lord, they would cry and moan and groan about not wanting to do it. And they go back to, well, we was in Egypt and seemed like we had it better than Egypt than what God is trying to take us. And they had been praying for 430 years to get out of there. So we had to be careful. Don't do like Moses and let anger keep him from being able to walk into the promised land. And that's why when I went back to the book of Joshua, God was very careful to tell Joshua, give the people my word. I went to chapter 1, verse 1. It said, now after the death of Moses, the servant of the Lord, it came to pass that the Lord spake unto Joshua, the son of Nun, Moses' minister, saying, Moses, my servant, is dead. Now therefore arise and go over this Jordan, thou and all these people, unto the land which I do, not you do, the land which I do give to them, even the children of Israel. And look what God promised them in verse 3. He said, every place that the sole of your feet shall tread upon, that have I given you. Now God has increased their territory. And when I look at this, y'all know I always go back to Shushna territory. Sometimes when God is doing something for us, don't complain, but walk into a hush now territory. Be quiet and see the salvation of the Lord. And in verse 3, he said, in every place that the sole of your feet should tread upon, that have I given you. And God pointed out all the territory that he was getting ready to give them. And then I got down to verse 6 here, and it said, be strong and of good courage, for unto this people shall thou divide for an inheritance the land in which I swear unto your fathers, unto their fathers to give them. But something seems like always get in the way when we're trying to get what God has our name on it. But can I put a pin there tonight? It's designed that way. If we didn't have nothing to obey God for or to obey God with, then how do we know that we'll be able to withstand when we're getting ready to go against? See, God, he instructs us to trust us. How do we know that we can trust God if we don't never have anything bad going on in our life? If we never have no problems going on, how do we know that God is a fixer? But when God does allow problems to come into our life, that's not the time to complain. That's the time to praise God, to worship God, and to obey God. And God said, if you can obey me in the hard times, if you can obey me when it don't look like it ain't gonna work out, but you still gonna stick to my word, God said, I got a blessing with your name on it. And that's what God wants us to see, that he's no shorter than his word. And God said, now Joshua, here in verse 7, he said, look, give them the law. Verse 7, only be thou strong and very courageous, that they may observe to do according to not some of the law, but all the law which Moses thou servant commanded thee. And then I went back over, come on with me to Deuteronomy. Come over to Deuteronomy chapter 34, if you will. Yeah, that's right. Deuteronomy chapter 34. Get my fingers to turn the pages here. Let's go down to chapter 34 and look at verse 5 and 6 here. Because this is something that let us know. No matter how good that we can be, no matter how much we want to follow God, no matter how much we want to do what's right by God, it's important that we carry it through. Wanting to do it and doing it is two different things. Verse 5. So Moses, the servant of the Lord, died there in the land of Moab, according to the word of the Lord. And he buried him in a valley in the land of Moab, over against Beth-Porah. But no man know of his sculpture until this day. And Moses was 120 years old when he died. Now, even though Moses was 120 years old when he died, God was saying that Moses, he still had plenty of life to live. God, if he let Methuselah live 969 years, Moses was just a baby, a child, when it comes to Methuselah's age. And somebody said Moses was old, he was getting ready to die anyway. No, that's not what the Bible said. Look at verse 7 here in Deuteronomy 34. Moses was 120 years old when he died. His eyes was not dim, nor his natural forces abated. He had not gone down. He was still a strong man at 120 years old. And who knows how long God would allow him to live if he had only followed God's instructions all the way to the end. Now, if Moses let folks got mad, and y'all know how we are, we'll get mad at the drop of a hat. But be careful when we do that and allow somebody else to keep us out of the promise that God has our name on. Now, if you will tonight, come with me. I want to go back to the law. Go back to the law. God told Joshua to teach the people. Let's go to Deuteronomy chapter 11. Deuteronomy chapter 11. And he told them to study and obey the law. And that's why it's very important that we take our Bible and we read it every chance we get an opportunity to know the will, what God has for us in our life. If we don't read it, how will we know what to obey? So God is letting us know that this is an important, this is a tool of life that we need to be able to get all the blessings that God has our name on. It's right here in the word how to get to what God has our name on. And look what God does. He turns around and he tells Moses to give them this law to live by. And last week, let me go back to verse 1 and 2, and then we'll jump down to where we stopped last week. Verse 1, it said, therefore thou shalt love the Lord thou God. Number 1, therefore thou shalt love the Lord thou God, and do what, God? And keep his charge, keep his commandments, and his statutes, and his judgments, and his commandments. How long you want us to keep them, God? The Bible says here, always. Every now and then, can I put them down when somebody make me mad? And then when I get through getting over being mad, then I pick them up and you still gonna bless me, God? God said, look, don't let the devil trip you up. Because that's his job, that's his MO, to kill, steal, and destroy. And if we're not careful, he'll kill, steal, and destroy the relationship that we work so hard with God to have. And that's why God says it's important that we know the law. That way we can follow the law. I went down to verse 2 real quick in Deuteronomy chapter 11. And know ye this day, for I speak not of your children which have not known and which have not seen the chastisement of the Lord your God, his greatness, his mighty hand, and his stretched out arm. He said, I'm talking to the folk, the grown folk that know better. We got some babies that have not seen the mighty hands of God. And if they sing it, they didn't understand what they were looking at. But God said, when we become of age, then God will hold us accountable from right and wrong. It's just like today, when a child at a certain age, you can't hold them accountable for right and wrong until they learn what right and wrong is. But when we get to the point of learning and knowing what right and wrong is, then God said, I'm going to hold you accountable. And then I went down to where we stopped last week at verse 5 and said, and what he did, well, in verse 5, let me go to verse 7. It said, but your eyes have seen all the great acts of the Lord, which he have did. Therefore, ye shall keep all the commandments which I command you this day, that ye be strong and go in and possess the land, whether thou goest to possess it. The same place that I was sending you, God said, I'm taking you. And I want you to go in and take what I got your name on. Now, if you mean to tell me I'm gonna have to take something, sometimes we have to take from the adversary what they're trying to steal from us. They'll try to come in and cut us off. We're almost to the promise. And they'll come in and make us mad and do the wrong thing, like they did unto Moses. And God said, be careful. Don't allow them to do that. I went down to verse 8. Therefore, you should keep all the commandments which I command you this day, that ye may be strong. If you don't mind, circle strong in the Bible. He said, you can't be weak and take what the devil has your name on. You can't take it away from the devil being weak, because the devil is strong himself. He's our adversary. And he got some chiefs, some captains of his army, know just how to get us off track, know just how to make us mad. Just like they did Moses. God said, Moses speak to the rock. Moses got mad and hit the rock. Call them rebels. That got him or kept him from walking in the promised land. And then I went down to verse 8, if you will, and it said, verse 9, and that ye may prolong your days in the land. So now when you get there, that don't mean you quit following the law, God said. He said, keep the law, that you may prolong your days in the land. In other words, y'all know a lot of times when we get blessed and say, oh, thank you, God. I've been waiting on this. I've been praying, Lord, I've been walking with you. But God said, now that you got it, now you need to learn how to keep it. Because just because you got it don't mean that the devil going to leave you alone. So God said, look, how I'm going to keep it, Lord, verse 9, that ye may prolong your days in the land which the Lord sware unto your fathers to give unto them in their seed, a land that floweth with milk and honey. And the only way I'm going to be able to keep it if I continue to follow the law that God has set for me to do. I went down to verse 10 and it said, for the land whither thou goest into possess it is not as the land of Egypt from whence ye came out. He said, well, I'm getting ready to do. In Egypt, you didn't have a voice. In Egypt, you had to get up when somebody told you to get up and lay down when they told you to lay down. God said, it ain't like that where I'm taking you. God said, I'm going to make you the head and not the tail when you get ready to walk in my promise that I have given you. And we have to know the power that God is allowing us to walk with. Every step that Israel took from Egypt here to the banks of their promise, standing on the banks of Jordan, every step they took, they ought to understand how they got there. It wasn't by their own, but only by the hands of God. And then I went down to verse 11, if you will. But the land whither thou goest to possess it is a land of hills and valleys, a land of drinking water, rain from heaven. And I stopped there for just a little bit because I had to let that soak in. Where I'm taking you, God said you can drink freely. It's going to be drinking water. He said, where I'm taking you, it's going to be hills and valleys. He said, where I'm taking you, it's going to be some drinking water, rain from where, God? Where you sending this rain? God said, rain from heaven. And then a lot of times we be, look, when we need something for God, God will rain it down for us. Why does he do that? Because we're walking how he's instructing us to walk. He said, I'll give you rain for him. Give you everything that you need. And then in verse 12, a land which the Lord thou God carried for. I start there for a moment. Because God said, well, I'm taking you. I'm the God now. I'm the one that's going to be providing for you. He said, you're going to have to do less work. You won't have to work like a slave when you was in Egypt. If only you follow my word, folk be wondering how you doing all this and getting all this, and you ain't out there. You're not working a garden. You've been blessed by God. It seems like you got so much in abundance that's coming to you. How you doing all that? God said, people are going to know that you are children of mine when I start the blessing, if you're walking in my word. Verse 12, a land which the Lord thou God carried for. The eyes of the Lord thy God are always upon it. God always watching it for you. From the beginning of the year, even unto the end of the year. He's the God. He's taking care of your promise. He said, all you got to do is just obey my voice, and I'll take care of the promise. I know when to plant things in your life, and I know when to take things away. God said you're going to be blessed when you come in and blessed when you're going out. I went down to verse 13 and it said, and it shall come to pass if ye shall hearken diligently unto my command. If ye shall hearken diligently, oh my God, diligently. God said, pay attention. Be precise in your listening. Pay attention diligently unto my commandments, which I command you this day. What you want me to do, God? He said, love the Lord your God and serve him with not some of your heart, but love the Lord your God and serve him with all your heart. He said, if you pay attention to me diligently, then God said, I will bless you diligently. And I'll pay attention to the blessings, to the need that you have. And our God is able to meet every one of them. I went down to the second part of verse 13, and then it said, God said, I will command. And let me go back to verse 13 in the first part of it. And it should come to pass if. That's where I was trying to get to. Can y'all circle, just go ahead. Let's all circle if in our Bible. If. That's the biggest word in the Bible. If. Two-letter word. But it's conditional. If ye shall hearken diligently unto my commandments, which I command you this day, to love the Lord your God and to serve him with all your heart and with all your soul. God said, just go ahead and throw the towel into me, surrender unto me. And my God, you'll never have to surrender to the enemy again when you surrender to God. Verse 14, that I will give you rain of your land. When you going to give it to God? God said in due season. Due season. In other words, God said when it's time. A lot of times we be wanting this and we be wanting that. And God said, I'm walking you through the process. But and you're going to get what you're asking for. But it's going to be in due season when you're ready for it. It's going to be when it's time for the harvest to come in. And let me just say this tonight, that whatever we plant in God's name, when you plant something in his name, when you do righteousness in his name, God said, whatever you plant, it's coming up again. If you plant righteousness, righteousness is coming up. If you plant hatred, hatred is coming up. Bitterness is coming up. But if you plant love, love is coming up. If you plant hope, hope is coming up. Have you ever planted hope in somebody else's life? And you share a word with them, don't give up. Let them know that God is there. And all you got to do is call on him. All you got to do is open yourself up to God and start listening to his voice. And God will give you the desires of your heart. God said, look, plant hope in other people's life. When you got it, give it to somebody else. Share it with somebody else. I didn't get this by myself. Well, how did you get it? I got it by being obedient to God's word. It don't mean that it was an easy journey, but the journey is well worth taking. It's well worth taking. I went down to verse 14 again. That I will give you rain of your land in due season, the first rain and the latter rain, that thou mightst gather in the corn and thy wine and thine oil. And I will send grass. Well, let me go back to verse 14. I don't want to skip that. Verse 14. I will give rain, your rain, in your land in due season, the first rain and the latter rains, that ye may gather. I circle gather. Gather in thou corn, thou wine, and thou oil. But wait a minute, God. Gather in the wine. Now, me, myself, I don't drink. But let me say this. Ain't nothing wrong with drinking when we do it appropriately. God said, even to gather in thou wine. Now, let me say this. It ain't the wine that a man or a woman can drink that caused the problem. It's what we do after we've drunken the wine. That what's on the inside of us should be able to control what we put on the inside of us. And I said this, a lot of times when we look at this and we look at, well, they just drunk, they drunk the wine and they got drunk and this is what happened and this is what they're saying. Sometimes the wine only gives an opportunity to the folk that do let out what's already there. So if we remove the things that is there that should not be, then the wine itself doesn't have any effect on us to the point where the Lord said, don't be a drunkard, but to drink wine generally, most people do it with dinner or lunch or what have you, drink it occasionally or what have you. There's nothing wrong with that. So I wanted to stop there. I was going to go on by tonight, but some told me to come back and let's go ahead and look at that too, because see, when we trying to live holy for God, understand that wine is not the thing that makes us do wrong. It's what's on the inside of us that makes us do wrong. And then at the same time, when we know we drank too much of it, what it's going to do to us. But whatever's in us at that point is going to come out. So we got to see be mindful as to what is it that we have on the inside of us that the wine may let out. Oh, Lord. Okay, let's go forward. I went down to verse 15, and it said, and I will send grass in the fields for your cattle. God said, everything you own, I'm going to take care that thou mayest eat and be full. He said, take heed to yourself that your heart be not deceived, and ye turn aside and serve other little gods, that you turn aside and serve other gods and worship them. Be not deceived. And we slip up and start to serving other gods. What other gods? Well, when we serve our jobs more than we serve God, when we serve ourselves more so than we serve God, when we spend time with everything else in life, the pleasures of life. You know, I may like hiking, I may like fishing, I may like this, I may like that. But ain't nothing wrong with those things. But he's saying is don't give more time to them that we're giving to God. And God is letting us know that it's okay to have some pleasures in life. Ain't nothing wrong with that. But God said, also give me the time that I'm rightly deserved. With all that I'm doing for you, God said, give some time back to me. I went down to verse 17. It said, and then the Lord wrath be kindled against who? Be kindled against you. And he shut up heaven that there be no rain. You mean to tell me that I can cut my blessings off? Go back to verse 16. Take heed to yourself that your heart be not deceived, and you turn aside and serve other little gods and worship them. And a lot of times other stuff can become little gods to us. And we started worshiping the job more than God. We started worshiping our possessions more than we worship God. And God said, be not deceived, that God will shut up heaven and he'll cut off the rain of blessings that he has restored upon us, that the land will not yield no her fruit unless ye perish quickly from off the good land, which the Lord give it to you. Now, we got to stop there real quick tonight. And if you will, give me about 10 more minutes. I know it's 7:04. And if we can give still 10 minutes tonight, we probably will call it after tonight for Bible study. We'll call it until after the first of the year. So if you will, give me about 10 more minutes to finish this point out. Verse 17. And then the Lord wrath be kindled against you, and he shut up heaven where there be no rain, and the rain yield not her fruit, lest ye perish from the earth off the good land, which the Lord give it to you. You mean to tell me that I can lose the good land? I can lose the spot that I am with God? Yes, we can if we do not follow his commandments. And God is letting us know you can walk in good territory, but also we can cause ourselves to walk out of good territory if we're not careful. And I went down to verse 18, if you will. He said, therefore shall ye lay up these my words. Where you want me to lay them up, God? He said, lay them up in your heart, in your soul. And then he said, not only lay them up in your heart and lay them up in your soul, but bind them for a sign upon their hands, that they may be as frontly between your eyes. In other words, God said, keep my word before you at all times. He said, keep my word with you, that it can be your guide, but also be your strength. Not only be your strength and your guide, but it'll be your help. God said, keep my word before you. And then in verse 19, it said, and ye should teach them. Who I need to teach it to, God? He said, teach them to your children